We were at a point where we had a system in place where it was a good solution for us at the time, but it really catered to a manufacturing industry. So the language was a little bit difficult for our industry. It wasn't particularly user-friendly, and most importantly, it was old. We needed to upgrade it. It was no longer stable. It wasn't at a place that we really felt comfortable keeping it around, frankly. We also had in this system a very cumbersome workflow. So let me just take you kind of through a day in the life of somebody entering metadata into the system. They would enter a small amount of information, the title, product number, maybe the type of format that's associated with it. And then they'd press OK, and then they'd wait and wait for this system to kind of churn. And then when it finally moved forward, it would ask them to verify that everything they put in was correct. And they'd move on to another screen, and it would do the same thing. You could only put in a small amount of data, and it would churn slowly, and then it would ask them to validate that step. That went on until the whole product was set up. We have a lot of products. Because we're taking in our products from the business school and also from our partnering institutions, this took a long time to get just one product in. And when you're getting dozens of products a day, or dozens or hundreds, really, of changes a day, it just made everything so cumbersome. Speaking as somebody in the operations team, it was really discouraging to see people in my team kind of staring at their computer with their hands in the kind of palm of their hand, their face in the palm of their hands, just watching the system struggle. So it was really, we were in a tough place. This particular system only housed the metadata. We actually had a separate system that stored the content files themselves. So it's two separate systems, one sending the metadata over, the other sending the content, both to the same places. It wasn't very efficient. It added a layer of complexity that we didn't need. So this is our system of record. This is, in our view, the most important system that we have. Now, I'm sure that the finance team and other teams would argue with me there, but really this is the first step of getting the products into the system. We really needed something that was stable and functional, user-friendly, and would last for a long period of time. So that's when we decided to launch a system to replace that existing system. And I'll go into how this project kind of evolved in a little bit, but we launched kind of an exploratory mission to review the other systems out there and the capabilities. And we ended up choosing Alfresco for a lot of different reasons. I'm just going to focus on a few of them right here. The first, of course, was that, as I mentioned, some of the other commercial solutions weren't a great fit for our industry. We have very unique data structure. Some of the systems that we saw were for manufacturing or maybe would have worked well in the medical field, but not quite for the publishing industry. A lot of them required a lot of customization that we didn't want to get into. So when we saw Alfresco, we knew that while we had worked with it in the past, Alfresco had been part of our system to store our content, so we knew that they could work with our data. And we also felt that we could work with the vendors and partners to create something that worked well within our industry. They had a long-term strategic plan, so this was so important to us, especially coming off of a system that was so outdated. We knew that Alfresco would be there with us through the long haul, not only for support, but also if we wanted to add enhancements at a later time. They had a strong partner network to choose from, so we actually worked with Ixis. We collaborated with Ixis on the application development, and that was actually, we both literally and figuratively couldn't have done it without Ixis. So we knew from working with them that they were able to build something that would meet all of our very specific data requirements. They were local, they would be there for support. So we felt very comfortable going into a partnership with Alfresco, knowing that we had a strong vendor on our side. And last but not least, there was improvements in user experience and functionality. So I will show you what those are. But overall, just seeing Alfresco in some of the demos that we had and what it could do and what Ixis could do for us we felt like we would have a better solution in place. This is a ridiculously high-level assessment or diagram of what our project was like. So as you can see, it was about a year long. It started with the replacement assessment and proof of concept. So that was when we were really exploring what option to replace our system with. We knew we had to replace it. We just weren't sure who to go with. Once we had finished that, we moved on to the requirements gathering and development sprints. I'm going to talk about how the requirements gathering went in later slides, but we were able to make each requirement a user story, and from there make sure that what we had developed was something that was functional for the individual users and addressed their really specific needs. I do want to talk about user acceptance testing and the training and documentation a little bit. So the testing that we did before we went live, we had done in a different way for us. We hadn't done it in this way recently. So we blocked off a room for 3 days, and we invited all of the super users of each business unit into the room, and we asked them to go through every single step that they would go through for their daily jobs. And we were in that room the whole time they were doing it. And this was really helpful because we got to see that what we had validated, what we had said was working, really did work for them. Sometimes you can say that this is good and you can sign it off, but unless you're the business unit and you're the person that does the work every day, doing this successfully, it's hard to see that. And it also really made us more secure in our decision to launch. The training and documentation we also did at the same time. So we used this opportunity to train one person in each business unit to really be the champion of the project and to do their own documentation catered very specifically for those units. In the past, IT had created all of the training documentation, and while that worked, it didn't work great because the language wasn't very specific to each business unit. So there was lots of questions, people would have to go back to IT, somebody would have to open up a ticket, and instead, now that we had the individual business units doing this work, we kind of inadvertently put a champion of that product into each business unit and opened up a dialogue. They were able to ask each other questions about the system. They were able to kind of show each other the cool new things that it had done that we hadn't had before, so it worked really well for us. And then last but not least, implementation. So I know that there's another member of higher ed in this group, so seeing that date that we went live is a little bit scary for somebody in the higher education field. That's about when the semester is wrapping up. We have finals going on, people are wrapping up their course packs, MBA students really want to walk away with some of the documentation, we're doing custom orders. This is not a time that we want something to go wrong. So we were really careful about implementation, and we did it in a way that we kept the old environment up while we went live with the new one. That gave us a rollback plan, which we didn't need, but it also helped us to ensure that the data validation in the end was accurate and everything was going swimmingly. There's some hurdles. There's no project without hurdles, but it really went well. Our project approach was agile. So I sat through a lot of sessions yesterday, and this was the same theme in every single case study. Everybody that had launched PIM had done an agile project methodology. I can tell you that we had been largely waterfall for a long time. And, yes?
Sorry, can I wait? Or?
No, that's fine.
Just curious, did you guys do incremental change from the new system, or they just kept the old one up and running and it's like a one big bang change?
We did. Yep, so he asked if we had done incremental changes from the old system to the new system. I think that the IT team can speak to this better, but we did do it in some phases.
Yeah, we couldn't do the whole thing incremental because there was some change required to the content model that could not be rolled back. So that's why the two systems were running, so they could roll back.
Yep. Does that answer your question?
I'm also interested, did you do user acceptance testing after each sprint, or did you just do the big document number at the end?
Yep, so we had members of one subject matter expert from each business unit on the team the whole time. So they would do the user acceptance testing at the end of each sprint, but then the large one at the end brought everybody in. So that was helping because even though subject matter experts we thought had all the information, there's of course some things that they didn't know that needed to be done, so it was helpful to do both. Yep, great question. All right. So for the Agile project management strategy, there's one thing I want to mention. So the enterprise IT team, they had a lot of background in Agile. The business units, primarily waterfall. We were learning Agile while we were doing this project. A little bit of a trial by fire. I'm sure we annoyed them quite a bit, but we kept it moving. It was really helpful to do this strategy. Some of the things that worked best from a business unit perspective was the interviews and workshops to gather requirements. In the past, we would have just sent IT a laundry list of things that we required. Maybe not all of them were really requirements. The rest of my team probably shouldn't hear me say that, but it's true. Some things, a lot of them might be enhancements that weren't part of this iteration. So having a workshop opened up dialogue. We got to the core of people's real needs, and we did take note of the enhancements, and we got some in, but this particular build was really just to replace the existing system, although we did get a lot of stuff in that we could. We used an issue tracking system, actually 2 issue tracking systems. We used Jira in collaboration with Greenhopper to track the project. So back when we were doing primarily waterfall, if anybody has ever done a project using email, hope that person's okay. If anybody's done a project using email, they know that what tends to happen is too many people are CC'd, so now you're getting too much information. Not enough people are CC'd, or if you're like me, you just lost the email. So having an issue tracking system for every user story was imperative. We couldn't have done it without it. It also, with Greenhopper, gave us a digital Kanban board to use. And going over the Kanban boards just a little bit, I couldn't get a picture of the actual ones because it did contain some sensitive information, but I stole this one. And what you can see is, if you're unfamiliar with the Kanban methodology, each column represented for us a place and time for that particular project. So it might say pending, in progress, completed, or actually blocker, on hold, and completed. And so 3 times a week we would meet, and then later, actually at the end of the project, it became every day in the week. We would meet as a team and talk about each ticket that was on the board at the time, what we were going to do with that, where we were, what was blocking us, and it kept us moving and it kept us honest throughout the whole project. We also chunked everything up into 2-week sprints, kept everything bite-sized, gave us milestones, and it ensured that we weren't able to take more than we could chew, for the most part. So no project is without hurdles, and we definitely had some. I think that these are probably the biggest ones. The first, I will say, is we had a lot of competing projects and workloads. That was both on the sides of the business users, but also on the enterprise IT side. So while enterprise IT had committed half of their time to this project, the business can't stop. So we had new product launches, tasks, system bugs and errors, things that just were kind of unforeseen that came up. And inevitably, each one of those involved somebody from our team or 4 people from our team. So it was a real challenge to keep things moving. There's a lot of late nights on this project. It's also true from, maybe even more true from the business units, because while we had one subject matter expert from each business unit, that person hadn't committed 50% of their time to this project. It ended up happening anyway, but that person was then in this place where they had to be on the PIM project, and they really needed to be supportive. There was a lot of work there. But they also had to go back to their managers and explain, why perhaps some things on their end hadn't been getting done in their day job. So that was a challenge. We also had some trouble setting expectations around functionality. So there were a lot of enhancements we were able to get in, but the core team knew exactly what the system was going to do in the outset. So what was happening is I'd be on that team, everything good, I'd go upstairs and I'd start to hear something scary, like, oh, well, sometimes if we have a new product that we just kind of heard of and we're gonna get in the system, in this new PIM, we're gonna be able to get it done in a day. That's not true. There's other systems that we need to work with. So we had to constantly manage that expectation. And that was a little bit tough, especially for the people that had only heard of the PIM, but weren't really sure what would happen at the end. Probably the biggest hurdle would be we underestimated the complexity around feeds. So yesterday, I heard someone say in a session, never underestimate how hard it would be to get information into the system and then how hard it would be to get information out. We have a lot of feeds. So all of that information had to go from the PIM to print vendors, multiple distributors around the world, customer service, FTP, our order management system. There was so many other systems that this information, specifically the metadata as well, had to go. And so each one of those feeds had some sort of customization needed in them. So I'll take our distributors as an example. One particular feed where we could send all of the partner content, perhaps for another distributor they couldn't get a certain number of them due to contractual obligations. It was pretty complicated. We definitely underestimated how much work would go into that. And then project management changes. So we had a project manager, and he ended up getting another opportunity and left halfway through. So what that did was we had to get somebody from the higher education team to kind of jump in for a short period of time. He stayed with us for a while, but then he had to go back to his regular job. And then we had another project manager come in from enterprise IT, and she really took us home. So, you know, we moved forward despite it, but it did shake up the agile methodology a little bit. Once you have project management, people tend to kind of go back to waterfall. So we did have a few hiccups there. It also, you know, there was some onboarding for the new project managers. We had to show them where we were, what we had done, what the goals were. So that was a challenge. So what would we have done differently? Definitely manage the system expectations. Speaking as somebody from the business unit side, I can say that there's more I could have done here. I think that we could have done road shows in our own units to really explain what the system would have done. That's something that, knowing what I know now, I think I would have done. Could have hijacked a full staff meeting, maybe done some demos. There's more that we could have done to really show what would be the final product, and more importantly, what that would mean, what it would do. We would increase our technical requirements. That's really around the feeds. So we would have documented that a little bit better and planned for that. Would have set resource priorities with management. And again, this is around the business unit. So I think that we should have had, the enterprise IT team had a statement, 50% of my time is going to be on this project, or 75% of my time for certain users. We should have done that on the business unit. So we really should have said, had a sit down with the management and said, this is what it's going to be, and this is what my time is going to look like for a while. I have to say, everybody was really accommodating, but it was definitely tough, especially since even if your manager is accommodating, you still have contractual agreements you have to meet at the end of the day. And then we should have increased communication to stakeholders. So that really does go back to road shows would have helped with this, but we had one monthly meeting where we invited everybody from the business units to come and see where we were. Didn't get a lot of participation. It was hard to kind of get people there. There's more that we could have done. Again, I think this really goes out to reaching out to the business units to take responsibility for that. And there's definitely ways to increase attendance. Maybe one or two of them could have had pizza. Everybody shows up for pizza. So I think that there's more that we could have done there that would have, even though it was still a successful launch, it would have just made the road a little bit smoother. Yeah? Go back. Oops. Yes.
How did you get buy-in from stakeholders in the beginning? I mean, with the old system, got to a point where any kind of system is good enough,
Please repeat it for the recording.
I'm sorry?
Repeat it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so he was asking how we got buy-in from the stakeholders. So that was part of the initial assessment project that we had done. Enterprise IT had kicked that off with a project manager who was new. She actually was the same project manager that really finished the project for us. And she invited all of the major stakeholders from each business unit and also from Enterprise IT. And they were familiar that we had a problem. They definitely had all heard us complaining about the existing system, but she did a presentation that really drove home the problem, what it was causing to, what it really meant for the end result, how delayed we were, how behind we were, what the backlog looked like. So she kind of set the expectation that something was needed, and then she invited them to be a part of the entire process, kind of vetting other options, looking over the budget that we had, what kind of projects would be in place. She really let everybody know that this would be a long project. She set expectations there. I think that that really helped with buy-in because everybody felt that they had been a part of that decision and that their needs were heard. So they felt more comfortable making a decision not only to go with Alfresco, to go with Ixis, and to do something that particular year instead of putting it off for another year. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Okay, so what went well? As I mentioned, the Agile approach, could not have done it without it. I think that if we had done a waterfall method, I may not be here telling you that we had successfully completed it. I may still be on that project. So it went extraordinarily well. The Ixis partnership went great. So Harry, I might put you on the spot here, but we partnered with Ixis, and we kept saying in private meetings that we just felt like they got it, that they really got what our needs were. And they were also extraordinarily accommodating to our last-minute requests. So we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, but there was a few times, maybe more than a few times, where we were like, ooh, could we just add this kind of searching? And is there any way that we can add an audit trail? And what can we do here? So even though I say that this system was supposed to be an apples to apples, just get something in to replace the old one, it really wasn't. There were enhancements that we got into before the final approach with Ixis's help. We also had a great team. So when you're in a room with the same people, maybe the same 7 or 8 people for a year, there's going to be some hurdles. We actually got through those very well. This team was really collaborative from the very beginning. There was so many times where I saw somebody say, I gotta go, there's a problem on the site, there's a new vendor that we're taking in, I have to be at this place, at another point in the country. And somebody else would say, okay, I got it. I got your piece of the project for that week that you're gone. That happened a lot. And because we had kind of these resource limitations, we really wouldn't have been able to get through without people just voluntarily taking on more work. I'm not sure if we could, actually I do think that we could repeat that process. I think what really made that happen was part of bringing everybody in the get-go from that assessment project. Everybody felt like they had heard those workshops. Everybody kind of bought into this. They were able to say what they needed, what they wanted from this, and they felt like part of the team, and therefore they felt that they could communicate effectively with everyone, but also kind of share workloads, rely on each other. That was critical for this project. And actually, Ixis is part of that too. They were in the room for many of these meetings. Defining information in advance. So I wish I could take credit for this. I can't. But there was one member, actually with the help of another, in our enterprise IT team that went through every piece of our metadata and painstakingly defined each one. Where did it go? Why was it important? Is it relevant? Can we keep it? Does it feed? And she did that. We have so many data fields, and she did that with every single one. We might have picked on her in the beginning for doing this, but we certainly ate our words in the end because this document became our Bible. We constantly referenced it in each user story. So when I would say from the higher education team, we really, really, really need this information in the system, and so does Harvard Business Review. And HBR might say, I don't really need this. And we would go back to that document and see what everybody agreed to in the beginning. And that was extraordinarily helpful. Also, the train the trainer approach. So I did touch upon this earlier. We really couldn't have done it without having the business units do their own training. It just got the buy-in that we needed. Everybody wanted a replacement system, but there are definitely people in every organization everywhere that are change averse. So having people that they could go to within their business unit that they were comfortable with, that they felt really understood their issues, really helped with the willingness to change to different systems. I actually will say that I didn't see this when we launched the old system many years ago. We actually caught people still using the previous system before, and we really had to kind of beg and plead people to change. In this one, we didn't have to do that. So where are we now? So the output, this is most near and dear to my heart. The output has increased substantially in the business units. So we've only been live for 4 months, so I don't have a lot of metrics on this, but what I can tell you is the backlog that we had in the higher education team is gone. So we had a backlog of partner content, and what that is every month our partners from Stanford, Ivy, Darden would send us kind of a large batch of products, and it would take somebody on my team maybe a week to get that in. Now I'm seeing a matter of hours. So people are able to turn this information out much faster. The system just kind of flows. There isn't that cumbersome data validation process that was really frustrating to them. They also feel, I've heard anecdotally that they feel like, you know, I may have to quote somebody. They said that they feel like the system trusted them. So with those validation fields, it felt like even though we hadn't, they had the perception that we had put in kind of babysitting triggers to say, are you sure that information's correct? Because we're not sure that you could do it. And these are people that we hired. We trust them to get the data in. I never want anybody to feel that way, and that's apparently how people were feeling. So having this workflow that didn't have those constant data validation steps increased just simply because it's faster, but also I think the people that were doing the data entry here felt better. They felt more efficient, and I think that really does get people to do their work in a more productive way. Our search and reporting capabilities have improved. So I have to be careful when I say this. I don't mean the analytics that we may have seen in previous sessions. What we put in place with the help of ICSIS is an advanced searching capability on our products, which we didn't have in a great way before. So now somebody from the sales or marketing team, they're able to say, I want to know how many cases that were written in between January 2012 and December 2012 that are widely available, that are converted to EPUB under the marketing discipline, and then press search. And that will give them a comprehensive list. And from that list, they're able to extract a report based on that list. They can also define what's in that report. So do you want a full report? Do you want all the information? Most people don't. So they're able to get kind of smaller reports or truncated reports with just the core details that they're really interested in. We've also, like I said before, have heard the positive feedback on ease of use. That's really where that I feel like the system trusts me comes into place. Our customer service team feels this probably the most. They're in a position where they're answering phones all day and somebody says, and we get this a lot, I wrote a case in 1972 and I think it was about GE, but I'm not sure. Can you find it for me? So they would have been out of luck in those kind of phone calls. Now they're getting these phone calls and they're able to find this piece of data And because we have all of the content in the same location, not only are they able to find it, but they're able to find the older versions that we previously wouldn't have been able to give them. We would have had to send them to the dusty archives at Baker Library, and they would not have been happy. So that's really where we're seeing the positive feedback. The reliable audit tracking is important, I think, primarily from an operational and product management standpoint. We, in our older metadata system, if I made a change to something, to one piece of metadata, the system would say, Caitlin made a change, at 11:52. And then Harry might come in and make another change right after me. It would wipe out my previous work. So if an author calls me up and asks me why we edited his abstract, I can't go back and see who made that change. Professor called, had a typo, made a change, paragraph 4, line 5. It's really awesome to see that information. And we're also now talking about PIM v2. So I'm sorry, we're just about out of time, but just really quickly, because we did that quick replacement of products of the system, we didn't get all the enhancements that people wanted. So now is the time that we're really starting to look at the wish list, the things that people really wanted to get out of it, particularly the editorial team. They had quite a bit on that list. So we're looking at the options. I went to some of the other sessions looking at other things that Alfresco can do. So that's where we're at right now. We do want it to be live for a little bit more than 4 months so we get everybody's full feedback, but that's definitely something that's on the horizon. So just very quickly, this is a snapshot of the final product. This is so clean compared to the previous system. The system before had lots of language. In fact, it had detailed instructions within the user interface talking about every step that you can make. So when we rolled this out to the company, they were pretty excited just to see they were excited to see the whites. And also the very simple navigation pane on the left-hand side. What do I want to do? I want to edit, create, search. It's pretty basic. This is also an example of our product record. So as you can see here, every product state primarily have, the ones that are static anyway, have the drop-down menu. If you hover over them or if you drop it down, it also has more information about that. So we do have product categories and types. It'll say specifically what that means. This is a case. It's a library case, which means it was done based on research. Here's the title. It's a paper product. All that information is right there, and it's very clean. We also have chunked all of the information into specific sections. So there's product metadata, contributors, which is authors, the availabilities, EPUB, PDF, Word, relationships, and taxonomy. And then there's my favorite audit log. So I can see who's been in this product. Most of the time it's me if there's an issue. And then finally, here's our much more comprehensive searching. So we do have the basic search. This is pretty much the same as it used to be. We also have advanced search now. And I should have taken a screenshot of this particular search screen, but it would have gone on and on. So there's so many different filters that you can have on the specific products. We have asset search, so now we can search, the production team loves this, you can search on specific formats. So I need to see everything in EPUB. We can search on specific taxonomy, so bring up anything that's ever been tagged with agile manufacturing. We can bring that up. I don't think that'd be a big search. We can search on authors, and then we can save our searches. So very, very often, especially from the product team, I get the same request for reports. So having the saved searches is extraordinarily helpful. All right, so that was just a basic overview of the project. I will answer as many questions as I can, but here's my email. If you think of something, please let me know.
So having your PIM solution in the same system as your content pieces, I presume you have textual pieces, photos, graphics, things like that. Are you able to search on kind of like a where used kind of situation where you have a particular photo? I want to know which products I've used that photo in from a rights perspective. Do you do that kind of
Yep. We're not doing that kind of reporting in the PIM right now. That's actually something that we're looking at. I just heard a request for that previously. We don't store video in this system. I don't know that we're planning to, but we would like to have some sort of information, maybe a tag, some kind of metadata field that can be populated that says, this case references this video in this location. It references this, these particular exhibits, and these exhibits are also somewhere else. So we're actually talking about that functionality, but we don't have it right now. Yep. Yep.
Is that all like just custom using any text module, or is it like completely custom search module built on top of that?
Yep. So it is a little bit custom, the search.
Oh, the search screen?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the forms are all custom. Under this, we're just getting the C file. They're still on the C file.
So only the UI is custom, but everything else is underneath is provided that.
Well, I mean, it's custom content models, lots of websites, things like that. But, yeah, I mean, we haven't torn apart no custom built on top of it.
Yep. I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
What version of Alfresco?
So that's 417 is the version, if anybody didn't hear. Anybody else? No?
Yeah, so for all your metadata that you kind of store, did you actually have to model that, build a database behind the scenes, some kind of relational model or something to manage all that information? Since you're not using a, quote, off-the-shelf PIM tool, you had to construct some kind of relationships between the data.
Yeah, we want to do it.
A modeling exercise, yeah.
Answer if you can use the mic.
It figures I just said that we didn't have a need for another microphone.
So we had a
Thank you.
pretty comprehensive modeling exercise with the IT folks.
Thank you, Harry. Anybody else? Yep.
How long the project?
Took a little bit over a year. Yep. It's 13, 14 months. Yep, I would actually, that's true. I would add a couple months to that because there was a lot of conversations that happened before we formally kicked it off. So that is true. Yep. Any others? Yeah.
How big of a team did you have working on it?
Yeah, so the core group of people is about 15 strong, but there was a lot of enterprise IT team that were working behind the scenes. It was even bigger than that I don't even know about because they were doing some of the application behind the scenes. Actually, if you give me your contact information, I can get you an exact number if you'd like, if you'd be interested.
At Ixis, we had roughly 2 to 2.5 people full-time on it for 3 to 4 months.
All right, well, if anybody thinks of anything, please feel free to contact me.